Hello everyone, welcome to Learn DAX channel. My name is Siddesh and in this video we are going to discuss the concept of context transition in case of a measure. So in the previous videos I have discussed row context, filter context, context transition and context transition in case of a calculated column. In this demonstration I am going to show what context transition in a calculated measure is. But before I do that, I want to focus your attention on this particular statement which says every measure reference always has an implicit calculate surrounding it. Simply, it means that whenever I am going to use a measure reference, whether or not I am explicitly enforcing a context transition, it is going to get enforced because of the presence of an implicit calculate surrounding it. So all this in words sounds great, but how does that work in a problem, or how does that translate to numbers? That's what we're going to see from this video. So let's get started with the demonstration. Like I always have been using, I'm using the products and the sales data set, where in sales I have sale IDs, products, product IDs, quantity and price. And all we are doing is trying to figure out the sales amount in different contexts. So let me go to the sales table and let me just write a formula for a sales amount. So it will be sales amount is equal to sales quantity into sales price. So what this will do is there is always an inherent row context present in a calculated column. So what I'm going to get is a corresponding value for each row. So for the first row, the sales amount is going to be the product of the quantity and price for the first row, which is why what we getting here is 1600, which is nothing but 800 multiplied by 2. And for the second row, it's 3 times 500, which is 1500, and so on and so forth. But what if I want to aggregate the sales amount for all the rows, and that's what I want to be shown as the output? So what I'll do is I'll create a new column and I'll write total sales amount is equal to sum x sales, sales quantity, or sales price into sales quantity. So now it is going to give me an aggregation of this complete column sales amount, which is going to be the aggregation of product of sales quantity into sales price for all the rows, which turns out to be in this case as 21,880. But we are supposed to learn about context transition in a measure, but all we have done is created two columns. Okay, here comes the fun part. Here is where we see the difference. So I have this particular formula, and what I want to do is before I create a measure, what I'll do is just I'll wrap this function around to calculate. We have all been saying before like right from the beginning of the video that there is a calculate that is always existing in case of a measure, and it is going to enforce a context transition. Let's enforce a context transition here as well, forcefully by introducing a calculate. So I write calculate, and once I enforce the context transition, then the expected result is to get a different value for the each row, and we just get the total sales amount for current row, which is clearly evident. So this is 1600, this is 1600, this is 1500, this is 1500, and we have achieved what we wanted to achieve, which is to enforce the context transition. Now let's do one thing, which is remove this calculate. Now get back to our original formula. Okay, now what if instead of this particular expression I create a measure having the same formula, and instead of using this long expression, I just replace it with the measure. I should get the same output. Let's check if we are getting the same output. For that, I will create a new measure and I'll just call it. I'll create a new measure. I'll call it sales amount measure. And I'm pasting the same expression. I'm copying and pasting the same expression. No change. Sum x sales, sales price into sales quantity. I hit enter. There is no calculate written anywhere in this formula. I go back to the table. I go to the sales amount column and I replace this expression with sales amount measure. I've written calculate nowhere. So ideally, I should get 21,880 as the output because nothing has changed. But once I hit enter, magic, context transition. Instead of getting the 21,880 as the amount, I'm getting a different amount for each row because the filter context has been enforced. So what I mean when I say context transition has been enforced is even though the sales amount sum X correspondent to this, there is a hidden or an implicit calculate function surrounding this particular measure. So when I write the formula as is in case of a total sales amount column, when I write this as is in case of a total sales amount column, it is going to give me the value as 21,880 for all the column, for all the rows. But the moment I write this as total sales amount is equal to sales amount sum X, it is going to essentially convert it into a context transition. And what I'm actually going to get is implicitly this is going to get enforced. And the output that I'm going to get is going to be different for each row, which is 1600, I believe 1500 and 500 and so on and so forth. So whether you write the calculate, whether you don't write the calculate, whether you enforce the context transition, whether you don't, in case of a major reference, it is always going to exist. So please keep that in mind whenever you're going to create any calculations using a major reference that a filter context, or sorry, a context transition is going to be present, and accordingly write your calculations or your DAX measures. So I hope by the end of this video that your understanding of the concept of context transition in case of a calculated measures improved. And if you did, then please share it with your friends. And if you have any feedback for me, please share it in the comment section and I'll be very happy to work on myself and to improve my own understanding of DAX. And like I say at the end of every video, thanks for watching and happy learning.